Also, if mum's room smells like incense, it is the best time to ask for something. Oh my god, that's why my parents always burned incense. I wasn't allowed to drink the milk left over after eating cereal. Never really got an explanation, but my dad would yell if I tried. I would get in trouble for not drinking the milk. That's so bizarre. We weren't allowed to say we were bored. We had a board jar, 50 pence a slip up. This wasn't an official rule in my house, but if I told my mom I was bored, she would give me a chore, so I stopped saying it. I was never allowed to leave a drink in the car because, according to my mother, someone could poison it. She's always been overly paranoid about safety, but that one is my favorite. The only movies we could watch on Sunday were 1, Bambi, and 2, The Sound of Music, but only Sunday. We weren't allowed to go in my parents' room ever. When I say ever, I mean ever. One day my brother and I decided that we couldn't take it anymore, so we snuck into their room. There wasn't anything in particular that was strange, but it was still weird that we weren't allowed in there. Oh, I had that rule. It wasn't until I was older that I dared to go in their bedroom. To some degree, I think it makes sense. My parents were mostly cool enough to hardly ever come into my room, and only did after they knocked on the door and asked to come in. They didn't even clean my room for me. It was a rule that went both ways and was about respecting each other's space. So I felt that was cool. No pooping or peeing within the hours of 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock AM or PM AM. Not sure if they had a reason, but it was always so random. Weird. How was that enforced? They just always told me not to. I bet this was their window for naughty time. They didn't want you wandering around the hall in case you heard them getting their freak on. You can play San Andreas but only on mute. You can kill all the prostitutes who want, but we don't tolerate foul language in this house. It kind of makes sense. You're not going to murder someone, but you'll cuss. We were not allowed to use the front door, ever. There was a metal screen on it with a deadbolt that needed a key for either side. My stepdad kept the key and even visitors had to go to the back through the side gate. With rural family, the front door is only used on formal occasions, holy holidays, where distant family comes. Otherwise everyone comes in the side or back porch. It wasn't a rule, but the door would either be locked and deadbolt, or you'd get treated weird for using it. We couldn't say the word fart, ever. It was up there with fuck and shit as far as bad words. I'm telling your mom you said 3 naughty words. I've already seen. Hair's fucking grounded. We weren't allowed to say I'm the best, or I'm the greatest. My dad grew up in a competitive household. I went to private Christian school and some kids told me they got in trouble at home if they said something was awesome. Only God is awesome. They'd be told, what about his works? Well, are you saying God's works aren't awesome? I wasn't allowed to wear my hat backwards. My dad thought that it was a gang thing. Mind you, this was in rural Wisconsin in the 90s. My parents are wonderful people, just may not have had the best understanding of the world at that time. My grandpa would always wear hats and, while he is sleeping, I put it on him backwards and he doesn't notice until someone tells him that if someone knocked on the door, we were not allowed to move or speak until mom decided that yes, we were home and would accept company. Didn't realize how weird that was until my friend came over and seemed surprised when someone knocked on the door, and I covered her mouth and pulled her away from the curtains. My mom refuses to answer the door for unannounced visitors and to this day will still pretend no one is home if she doesn't feel like socializing. It's even worse when they call her cell phone and hear it ringing from within the home despite every television being on mute and every light in the house being turned off. Is this weird? I don't answer the door unless I'm expecting someone either. After school treat was the only time we could have cookies. Only 3, not too weird, but it had a significant impact. I'm 50 now and will still have exactly 3 cookies when I have cookies. Cursing Thursdays. You could say whatever you wanted with no consequences. Had someone stay over who knew the rule. Opened my parents' bedroom and said good night motherfuckers. If you didn't swear at your parents on the other days of the week, this proves the purge works. Realization dawns on me that the purge movies make sense now. I should never ask what's for lunch/dinner. My mom and dad would answer food and grilly, so we stopped asking after a while. That's actually quite funny. Whenever my parents asked me what I wanted for dinner, I would always say food. They stopped asking me what I wanted to eat when I said it in front of some guests, which made it seem like they didn't feed me. No violent video games unless they were about history. So Call of Duty World at War was okay. Age of Empires, Assassin's Creed. If you come home at night and the door's locked, even if I have a key, find somewhere else to sleep. Can't remember which serial killer this pertains to, but one got a victim this way. A girl came home past curfew and her parents said she had to sleep outside. Then the killer took her from her porch. My memory of this is very vague, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about the details. You don't use save on the computer, you always use save as, because if you don't you could delete everyone's information on the computer. At least your parents knew the difference between save and save as, but save doesn't wipe the computer. For some reason I couldn't say crap, but it was okay to say shit and ass. This was around the time I was 11/12. I'm gonna go take a CR, I'm going to force shit out of my ass. No singing at the dinner table. This rule was frequently broken. I can't remember what I did wrong, but my dad came up with about 20 pages of rules I had to follow as a punishment. The weirdest was that I could no longer eat ice cream sandwiches. Was it in MLA format though? Wasn't allowed to watch anything with a black person in a prominent role. My dad was super racist, so I missed out on everything from That's So Raven to Fresh Prince. Even Dora got a hard pass. My dad was the same, till his own dad informed him that he was not, in fact, anywhere close to being white. I'm curious how your dad lived that long without knowing he wasn't white. Even if he looked white, how could he know nothing of his background? He was blind, so they just told him he was white, a la Clayton Bigsby. We were only allowed one towel a week. We could do whatever we wanted with it, but we didn't get another until next week. This was a test. You were supposed to weaponize your towel and take your siblings' towels, becoming the towel god. How do you live with being such a disappointment? My grandmother said not to shit during a lightning storm because a bolt of lightning might strike the pipe and electrocute me. My stepmom would send strongly worded emails to my mom regarding my overconsumption of yogurt at their house. And once again, Brenda, your child has taken another one of my key lime pie your plates. She has her own, and I can't understand how you haven't explained to her that the yogurt is not communal. My parents are awesome, but I have some weird cousins. When I was younger, my parents went on a short anniversary trip, leaving me and siblings with my older cousin to watch us. She is the same age as my parents. I remember one morning turning on Magic School Bus, and she frantically grabs the remote from me and turns it off. She then proceeds to go on a lecture on how witchcraft is a sin and made by Satan himself, and that Magic School Bus is one of those sinful abominations. I couldn't fucking believe it. Turns out her kid wasn't allowed to watch anything like that. Harry Potter, Magic School Bus, Wizards of Waverly Place, some of the many things that apparently are just a gateway to joining a satanic cult. Her sister held the same beliefs. I had to recite multiplication from 1-12 if I wanted to play games. I can respect this one. Actually, has it helped your quick math skills? Yes. Bedtime was 7 PM until I was in my teens. I didn't realize other kids had much later bedtime until I was a teenager. I think it was mostly because my mum's favorite soapy comes on at 7 PM. We were noisy kids. My dad hated it when I walked barefoot on the beach. He always wore tennis shoes at the beach. Is he from Central America? Sand fleas or jiggers are a very real nightmare thing that burrow into your skin and swell up to the size of peas. Don't look them up if you want to sleep. I wasn't allowed to eat my mom's cheese and crackers, so when I went to my wife's house, her mom had some and my sister-in-laws and wife were eating them. They offered me some and I told them I'm not allowed. They were so confused. When I hit high school and got my first GF, my dad made a rule where if I wanted to get laid, just tell him and he'd leave the house for as long as I needed, but only if I agreed to do the same when his GF came over. My dad made up a rule to stop my big brother from asking about getting a dog every 10 seconds. We had neighbors on both sides who had dogs, so the rule was that only every other house could have a dog. My brother believed it for a long time. Calvin's dad logic. Well played. This is golden, Mr. Skeletal. It appears only once every 20,000 years. Like the video and subscribe to Comment Awards in 20 seconds or you will never have calcium and good bones again.
PG.
On top, food chain, won't stop. New game, hot box that blue haze. One lock, two chains, no bras, two babes. Mic drop, new stage. Lights in my rear view. 5 cops, full race, faster than a Tesla. They say I'm exhausted. What's one rule that your school workplace has implemented that absolutely backfired? My high school banned girls from wearing any shirt that exposed their bra straps because seeing a bra strap would give high school boys evil thoughts. Most of the girls in school responded by wearing the same shirts they'd always worn, without bras. As a teenage boy, it was a happy couple weeks. The school tried to then mandate that all female students wear bras, until a male teacher asked a 15-year-old if she was wearing appropriate undergarments or not. She called him a pervert. Her parents, who thought the whole dress code things was as stupid as most of the students, threatened a sexual harassment suit against the school. Everybody in charge panicked and it all went back to the way it was before they tried to change anything. Until a male teacher asked a 15-year-old if she was wearing appropriate undergarments or not. This is my favorite tale of the thread. The thought of the yawning chasm that opened up beneath this rules makes me chuckle. During our general meeting last week, the owner of the company went on a bit of a rant about negative reviews of management on a popular jobs website with a green logo. He demanded that we stop posting negative reviews immediately and shamed anyone in the room who had done so. As you can guess, people doubled down and posted their grievances on the same day as the meeting. The green logo company doesn't take too kindly to that sort of behavior. Seriously, they will terminate service if management is caught doing that. Report it. Because of rumors of a drug problem in the school, the administration decided to drug test students. The media jumped all over that, violation of our civil rights or something. The initial statement was that anyone who failed the test would be kicked out of school. After the 40th or so kid failed, they changed the policy to mandatory meetings with the counselor. After the 100th kid failed, they hired another counselor. Our school just brought in drug sniffing dogs that would randomly come into classrooms. The thing was, the sheriff's department would always be parked in front of the school before the first bell with clearly marked K9 cars. So anybody who had drugs would see the cars and just skip school that day. Absences increased massively. No personal conversations. The office would be silent for hours and motivation took a huge nosedive. If the owner heard a personal conversation, he would call the person out and yell at them. God, that owner was a willy. Glad I got out. I took over managing a group whose previous boss had this rule. Productivity skyrocketed. The part I'm most proud of is the employee I was warned about being lazy and belligerent became one of my best assets. All it took was to treat him with respect. My old boss tried implementing an incentive scheme for the underperformers while anyone who consistently did well received nothing. 3 of us quit within a month. We used to be allowed to stream music etc on our computers. Spotify was an approved program and would come installed on your computer. Someone complained about productivity despite us always doing our work, and so they banned streaming of any kind on our computers. But now everyone just listens on their phone, so you walk around the office and nearly everyone has their phone out now, so it looks even worse when sponsors come into the office. Yo, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube are easily my best work friends. Banging out emails all day without listening to music would be borderline unbearable. Work instituted a points system for being late or calling off sick. Accrue too many points and you get written up, fired if it continues. They doled out the same number of points whether someone was a minute late or called off altogether. And if an absence lasted up to 5 days, it was still only one absence. So anyone who overslept or encountered heavy traffic and was running late would just stay home for the rest of the week. After several months, they decided that being late was only worth half a point. In our office, we're not allowed to have more than 14 consecutive days off. So one guy booked a cruise for a month, booked off 14 days, then 1 day back, then another 14 days off. He called in sick on his 1 day back. We weren't allowed to be friends with kids in grades above us, but we could be friends with kids in grades below us. That rule didn't last long. Turn to your left and shake hands with the person standing next to you. At an industrial site I used to work for, they introduced an absolutely no overtime policy. The people that most commonly worked overtime were the maintenance guys. They had to cut out their preventative maintenance in order to make their hours while being available for all shifts. It took 3 months of daily breakdowns before they decided to try something else. Boss insists that lunchtime is from 12 o'clock 12:30 p.m. No exceptions. Lunch is not paid time. The second day he comes in hot to trot with something for me to do between 12 o'clock and 12:30 and needs it done right away. I look over at my clock, which says 12:09 or whatever, and say, you said yesterday that lunch is from 12 o'clock to 12:30. No exceptions, and went back to my sandwich. If I don't get paid from 12 o'clock to 12:30, there's no way in heck I'm working for free. College removed chairs in cafeteria so people wouldn't hang around. Now people just don't eat at the cafeteria. It's a ghost hall and most of the food is thrown away daily. Really sad. God forbid anyone socialize in a building of the college they're paying for while eating food they are also paying for. Lonadal, a 14 school in Lonadal, MO, late 80s, early 90s. Our fairly small, rural school went from K8. So, we split lunchtimes in our gym cafeteria. For some reason our school actually invested in a noise control system because we could apparently be quite loud during lunch, and I guess the teachers got tired of trying to keep us kids quiet-ish and eat. This new piece of equipment was mounted high on the wall and looked exactly like a stoplight. When it was green, we were free to talk. If it became yellow, we were to be careful of how much noise we made. If it turned red it would buzz loud, like when the game clock runs out at a basketball game. Installing this thing almost immediately had the opposite effect they desired. It became a game to us. We would only get quiet in order to make it go back to green. Then, as a large group, we would progressively get louder. We would stall it out at yellow before surging our collective voices to make it hit red and BUZZZZ, at which time we would all cheer, laugh and get quiet again to reset it to green. Good times. That's why they frown on putting breathalyzers in bars. Turns it into a competition. Any support call lasting longer than 25 minutes must be reported to higher ups for review. I.e., if you have too many, no matter if it's your fault or not, you get a disciplinary review. I implemented the rule of politely hang up on a customer as close to 25 minutes as you can and call them right back. I am sorry, I am experiencing a small issue with my phone. Is it okay if I call you right back? Gotcha. Outgoing calls are not reported or recorded. It's amazing. Any software related to job, whether written inside or outside company time, belongs to the company, me. So if I write and release malware at home, it's the company's problem? The clause was immediately removed. Outside company time, that has got to be illegal. My friend worked as a technician at a place that did installation for telecom, sound, cable, pretty much anything tech related really. The techs were paid by work order completion. Each job had a value that got paid out when you finished the work order. The experienced techs could finish more jobs in a day and made some seriously good money. They were motivated to work fast to get more jobs done, but also to do it correctly because having to go back within a certain time window and fix a problem didn't pay out, so it lost money. Well, some new management came in and decided to change everyone to hourly wages. Their idea to make techs focus on getting the job done right and not rushing it. All the really good techs saw a massive pay cut from it and immediately quit. The rest of the techs suddenly had no reason to finish jobs quickly since you got paid the same whether you did 2 installs or 10 installs in one day. So everyone just started slacking off. Within a few weeks the orders were backed up so bad install dates were pushed out for a month or more. And when people finally did get their stuff installed, it took all day instead of a couple hours. That one change completely fricked over the company. Nothing like greedy management to completely frick up a good thing. No cell phones in high school. Security collected them when you walked in, put them in Ziploc bags, and locked them up. They lost like 5 people's phones. Lost. Had a fellow at my old place of work that was promoted to sales manager. Within a few days he drafts up a document which he tries to get all of us to sign, basically stating that we aren't working to our full potential and that to make profits so we would have to work even when we weren't working, aka taking calls from customers no matter the day or time. This resulted in an almost immediate revolt and about 10 plus people bypassing him directly and going right to the owner. He was demoted, then later fired within a week. That's one of the potential problems of promoting within. Some people think they know how to improve the process cause they work in the trenches all day, so they get promoted and start making sudden changes. They don't realize that you can make changes but you can't do them drastically. Pizza place I worked at in high school implemented a zero tolerance policy on employees taking home any food home that wasn't paid for at non-employee prices. Any screw ups or unpicked up orders trash. The local homeless population started flocking to the store and calling in bogus orders because they knew there would be free pizza in the dumpster every night. Our process integrity people decided every international order over $100,000 needed to be approved by a manager at the purchase requisition stage before the sales order could be processed. The problem? Purchase requisitions only generated after the sales order was completed. This meant it was impossible to complete any international order worth more than $100,000, and they launched this policy unannounced 2 days before Christmas. I ended up staying in the office until 9 at night trying to get our data people to create a way for me to order $300K in parts from Sweden before the holidays. I was told this story when I was in the army by a parachute rigger. The workday in the army is 9 o'clock to 4:30. Riggers packing troop shoots had a daily quota of 35 shoots. Once they got good at it, these guys could be done by 2:30, which is a very nice workday indeed. Well, they got this new captain who decided that since these guys are getting 35 done by 2:30, then obviously making them work until 4:30 would increase output even more. So of course that unit's numbers went way down, and the 35 and you're done for the day was quickly reinstated. No backpacks in the classroom, which led to hundreds of backpacks in the principal's office one morning. No one gave a frick about that rule. In Germany, you need a paper from your doctor when you are sick at least 3 days. They enforced that you needed one even if you just are away for 1 day. So everyone had to go to the doctor if not feeling right, and of course we were away for weeks. We have the same here in Finland. My superiors accept that you call them if you have fever or something minor. 1-2 days off and mark them as normal working hours, rather than going to doctor and get 1-2 weeks of sick leaves. Works for me, works for them. A big shipping company I worked at for a couple months said we would be working 7 AM to 4 PM. They didn't tell all the new employees, including myself, that holiday hours were going to be 7 AM to whenever the frick we feel like telling you to go home, around 10 to 11 PM. Naturally, people would get in 5 to 7 hours of work and go on break, then just not come back. That led to we can no longer allow lunch breaks. Me and roughly 50-70 other workers quit on the spot. The deputy head of our school banned fidget spinners, and rightly so. In his defense, they were everywhere. On the final day of year 11, someone hacked his school intranet login and edited the bulletin, leaving a notice in his name, saying that fidget spinners were now not only unbanned, but mandatory, and that aficionados could come to his office and learn tips and tricks from him. Real world heroism. Stopped giving kickback for walk-in sales. I work at a hotel and the high management had the bright idea not to give us anything for charging walk-ins, late checkouts, early check-ins and upgrades. So now we give them for free whenever we can. Then some shat will leave that they're certified as they were and charged for X after talking to Y in their TripAdvisor review. Zero tolerance just created a new way to bully. And zero tolerance for fighting did not decrease fights. Those that started the fight were going to get in trouble no matter what, so the consequence didn't matter to them in the first place. All this does is encourage the attack to beat the living crap out of the attacker. Zero tolerance actually made fighting worse at our high school because of this. It was actually my rule. When I was managing a store, my rule was that the closer had to do all the closing work and mark the checklist, and I would check it the following morning. However, I put a loophole in. If you close tonight and open tomorrow, you can come in early the following morning. I was really the only one who closed and then opened the following morning, and I knew that on many of those days I worked 10 hours with non-stop managerial work. So instead of staying late to clean, I like to come in early and do it in sunlight. Well, one day I followed my rule, and the next morning I woke up sick and had to call an employee to cover. He showed up to a dirty store, opted not to clean, and then got written up when the owner made a surprise visit. I didn't close, so it wasn't my job, and the owner said, "You work here and the store is dirty, so it is your job." I then had to go tell the owner that it was my fault, and he still responded, "Regardless of what you did or didn't do, he came into a dirty store and did not clean it. That's not acceptable." I removed my rule change and just made it mandatory to clean before leaving, lol. A few years ago we weren't allowed to stand in groups bigger than 4 at our school because this old teacher told us it was gang behavior and encouraging gang violence. One day my entire year of like 100 plus people got in a massive group screaming gang gang and throwing gang signs on our school field, so they had to bring every single teacher out to try and split us apart for a straight 20 minutes. Best school day ever. We did a mass hug around the flagpole, then spent 3 days holding any hand of any person who walked by. This was after they told us we could not touch anyone. You have been visited by the magic exams cat. You'll pass any exams. No need to comment. Oh, I hope this doesn't backfire. Actually, you can leave a comment and YouTube will show this video to more people. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I post new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people. Workers of Reddit, when have you said, "F this, I quit"? Years ago I worked in a restaurant, and it was Christmas time. This place was supposed to function with 4 waitresses, a busboy, dishwasher, manager and 2 cooks. Only the manager and I showed up. He did the cooking, I took orders, served, bussed tables, washed dishes and so on. During this I accidentally dropped 2 bread plates and they broke. Manager says to me, "I'll have to take those out of your pay." I told him that was funny, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. I turned around and grabbed a stack of dinner plates, threw them on the floor, and said, "Take those out of my plate too," and walked out to leave him with the whole mess. I quit after working for 4 hours at a sushi restaurant. I asked where the bathroom was, and I was told we don't really get bathroom breaks. I left right then and never came back. It was pretty sad. The manager said he understood and wasn't mad at all. I had worked at a university for 23 years. There were over 7,700 staff and I think I had met half of them by then. Working as a senior fielded tech was awesome for the first 20 years. They were very flexible and I had lots of side gigs. In the end the bean counters came in and made things more efficient by outsourcing many tasks. Usually they were the fun things. The last year was very repetitive and mundane. Lots of problems that we couldn't fix because they were someone else's problem. One day I came in and attempted to resolve 7 different problems, and I was shut down on each because they each had their own team of people whose responsibility it was. I said, "F this, what do you need me for?" Went straight to HR to quit. Belinda, the hour manager, was not your typical cliched type. I'd fixed her PC before and knew her. She said, "Don't quit today, take the weekend, wait until Monday, and see how you feel then." I took her advice, temporarily retracting my signed resignation, and went home. On Monday the largest round of redundancies were announced in the university's long history. Because of the enterprise bargaining agreement, the payouts were incredible. My accountant, when he saw how much was being offered, suggested they had made a mistake and called on my behalf to check if it was correct. It was effectively 2 years' salary after tax. I would have missed out if Belinda had accepted my resignation. I used to work at McDonald's. I know. Opening usually involved me at the front counter with a headset on, so I could do drive-through orders and handle making coffee / putting orders together / taking money at the front from the little old people that came in at the crack of dawn every morning. We would also have a manager who was there to be important, and one person in the kitchen. We are a small rural town, so usually this is fine, but we were on kind of a major highway, so sometimes it would get busy out of nowhere. Depending on the manager, the amount of help we had would vary wildly. One morning we got super busy, and I started cracking under the pressure. I'm a fantastic multitasker, but my drive-through line was backing up, since I was trying to juggle them and all the walk-in folks from my front registers, and when it gets packed, Well, it's fun. I glance around trying to find my manager for help. I see him on one of our cameras. He's outside smoking a cigarette around the side of the building. Mind you, this is like his third trip out to smoke this morning. I'm absolutely dying trying to get caught up. Customers are being passive aggressive saying they will come behind the counter and get their own coffee and stuff. I have people yelling at me and my headset from the drive-thru. I end up having to remove the headset just to try to get the front line sorted. I start making progress with the front, but I basically had to sacrifice the drive-thru customers for 2 minutes. Apparently the cars outside start yelling at my manager and interrupt his smoke break, so he comes in, sees me with my headset off and goes berserk. He's like host taking the drive-thru orders. I'm in the middle of trying to get a fresh pot of coffee going, so I sort of auto-respond no one. Hang on. As I continue to dash around behind our counter to grab a fruit and yogurt parfait for an order, he basically gets in my way and starts giving me shit. Loudly, talking to me like I'm a dog. I point to the camera and yell loudly enough to disrupt the entire inside of the restaurant. I'm these 2 registers, first window, second window, and I'm bagging. I'm like 4 people and you're out behind the building not doing shit. His eyes go wide. I can tell he knows I'm holding on by my last thread. He sighs. And he's like, you're in a ton of trouble, but we can talk about this later. No. Fuck him. I'm done. I'm all riled up from random customers yelling at me. I toss him the headset. You want to give me shit for not being able to run like 4 stations with no support. Run 5. I'll watch. I remove my name badge. He went to say something to me. I turn away, facing the one girl working in the kitchen who is watching this all play out. I remember telling her I'm so sorry, and then I dropped my name badge, toss my hat on the counter, grab a water cup, put on, and zip my jacket so my uniform is covered up. I go to the drink fountain, fill my water cup, and then I go sit on the far side of the seating area and watch him go down in flames. He ends up also taking off the headset and picking up the phone, so he can spam call the whole workforce one by one trying to call for help. It's like 5 AM so no one is going to accept a call from their work number. About 10 minutes into his struggle he ends up very loudly pleading with me to come back from behind the counter. I can't even see him on the other side of the sea of people swarming the counter at this point. I call back I need a smoke first. And I go outside. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. I drive home. He ended up losing his job. Worked at a mall retail store in college for a couple years. When I was just a lowly peasant the manager was great to work for. Once I became a key holder is when things changed. I learned very quickly why the other key holders didn't last. The manager would make rash decisions that would then be blamed on everyone but her. Last straw was when the evening shift didn't change out some signage and I get in the next morning having no idea there was new signage to be put out. She came in and berated me about the signage not being updated. I walked in the back, dropped my keys off, told her I quit, and went to walk out. She grabbed me and told me I need to give a written notice and fax it to corporate. To whom it may concern. I might go XS big terminate my employment effective immediately due to manager's inability to properly treat staff. Faxed it and walked out. She read it after I had already sent it and chased me out, berating me more, claiming I would never get another retail job in this mall. Blah blah blah. 3 weeks later I started at another store in that mall and always made it a point to smile and wave at her when I saw her. When I was 14, I wanted a summer job with my best friend. We went to the fast food shop at the beachside. It was quite popular since it was the only fast food around. We get there on a Friday afternoon and we meet the owner, 50-something man with a big belly from probably the fast food he serves. Tells us we can get there the next morning and people would show us around. We get there at 9 AM, like he told us, and there was no one. First employees arrive at 10:30 to open. They have no idea we were supposed to work. They tried to help us the most they could, but they were cashier with no training for the food stuff. Both their cooks left that week and the owner was doing all the work. We finish our first day without any trouble. Slow day overall. Sunday arrive and we are not prepared for the sheer number of customer. We still have about no idea how to cook the food and how the equipment worked. Owner arrived with a bunch of his friends. We were swamped with people, but he shoved them around a bit and asked us to do 6 hot dogs, 6 fries and 6 Diet Cokes and fast. We knew it was for him, so we told people to wait, and we finished their order. Not 30 seconds after, the owner comes back behind the counter and begin to tell us we are shit at our job, and that the fries were not cooked enough, and that we messed the condiments on the hot dogs. Mind you, there were a lot of customers waiting for their food at that point, and they were all looking at us getting yelled at by the owner. I looked to my friend, he looked at me, and we both knew what to do. We took our aprons off and told him to fuck off. We left him with all the orders right there and then. Never went back there. They closed down about 2 years after. Job got a VIP contract to vaccinate a bunch of elite clients. They rushed. They brought on some extra nurses, barely vetted them, and began. Virtually no breaks and piles of paperwork. They didn't finish ordering and setting up the computers, and there was only one computer to chart on like 100 patients a day. Not all the nurses got their clearance for the computer yet either. Scariest part was I had to stop someone from reusing a needle that she didn't realize she used on a previous patient. She told me she only primed it, pushed the air out, but I told her without alarming the patient that it was not suitable. I told her to go away and cleaned up her area, vaccinated the patient, and never went back. I was already sick of them only thinking about the bottom line. I worked as a server at a bar during college. The head bartender each day was in charge of assigning tables to the server. There was one bartender who really didn't like me, and every time she worked, she would give me the worst tables so that I wouldn't make as much in tips. She also did the scheduling. She started only scheduling me for slow times early in the day, like during lunch, when we would have 50% off lunch specials. It sucked, but fair enough. She does the scheduling and I needed the money. Well, it just got worse and worse until I was barely making minimum wage, even though I was making close to $20 an hour when I started. One day, during a slow lunch, I was working with a different bartender. When the bartender's shift ended, the other bartender who did the scheduling came in to take over. I was serving a large table of probably 15 people, probably the best table I had had in a week or so. She saw this and decided to reassign tables and work as a server as well as bartender. She of course took my table and said it was now hers, even though I had been serving them for about an hour and they were almost done with their meal. This wasn't the first time, but it was the last straw for me. I went up to the table, explained the situation, and instead of just transferring the table, I cashed them out, which they were happy to do. So I collected the cash tip, told the bartender fuck you. I quit, and walked out with the tip from the table, and never talked to anyone at that bar again. I found a better job the next day. I was hired for a college to run their office, where students got hands-on work in the field. When I discovered that they were ripping off students' hours, I started providing students copies of their hours and telling them to keep a notebook with the copies for their records. See, the students were on a contract that if they didn't graduate by the date estimated for completion, students were required to pay $200 every additional week it took to complete among suspensions, which in turn went against contract graduation date. They also asked me to falsify a report of students' absences to suspend them, even though I had documented proof the student was in class. I decided to leave that job, but not before telling students to report them to the state board and providing statements for the lawyer who the students gathered to represent their case. I used to work as some kind of aid worker / rescuer in events with large gathering of people, concerts, festivals, etc. The boss / owner always put her head down for the clients and allowed them to exploit us. One of the regular clients was the event manager of a popular stadium. They would ask us to be in the stadium 3 hours prior the event to clean. Yup, and stay afterwards to clean. Yup. The manager wasn't paying more money for it, but the boss didn't want to lose the client, so we just have to do it. So, there would be events with that took 16 hours to complete, with a menial pay, no food or beverage, and with the client expecting us to do more work for free. Note, I've never did that, and always encouraged my partners to leave. It wasn't our job to clean. But the moment that made me say fuck this shit was when the boss called me saying that the client emailed her with a complaint about me. I thought it would be about me and my team always leaving after the job was done and not staying for cleaning. But no, they told me that they always see you chatting with your partner and with a smile. They don't want the attendants to see their workers distracted and or laughing. They want to show that only professionals work with them. So they are asking that you turn down a notch your positive attitude and keep a poker face all the time. If you enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing. Cashiers of Reddit, what was the worst time you blew up on a customer? If you enjoy this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. At a pawn shop, the lady paid me with a 20 and I gave her change. She flipped up because she knew she'd given me a $100 bill. She screamed, cursed, and called me every name in the book. Just lost her mind. The whole time, she's saying she knew she paid with a $100 bill but she just put one in her wallet earlier. I asked her repeatedly to just check her wallet then, to see if the $100 bill was still there or not. She just kept yelling she didn't need to check, because she knew she'd given it to me. Eventually she checked and all the anger just blew out of her. She was mortified. The $100 bill was there. Not cashier, but now ex-bartender, and this was a while ago, so I may not have everything that's said 100% correct. Right after we closed one Friday or Saturday night, I was sent to sweep up a broken glass that happened to be next to a table where a couple of girls were still sat finishing their last drinks. The DJ had just stopped playing music. Bouncers were in the process of asking everyone to leave. A lot of the broken glass happened to be under where one of the girls was sitting. So I politely said, please, can I ask you to move so I can sweep up this broken glass? She gave me a really dirty look down at her drink, threw her glass on the floor next to her, so I now had twice as much to sweep up, and said, you can't make me move anywhere. Get out. We are closed and I already asked you politely. My manager heard, came over and asked what happened. I told him, and he just went, okay, you're barred to the girl. It was so satisfying when she tried arguing with him, and he got the bouncers to escort her from the building. I was working at a coffee shop in a busy downtown area. There was a businessman that was notorious for being abusive with our staff. One morning he came in and ordered a coffee and a cranberry scone. We happened to be out of cranberry scones that day, and when I informed him of this, he flew off the handle and started swearing at me. I looked him square in the eye and said, you're a grown man throwing a temper tantrum over a cranberry scone. Sort your life out. I then calmly turned to the next customer. The next day he apologized and was never a problem again. This wasn't me, but I was involved. When I was in high school I worked at a shoe store, the one with that prize wheel from hell. We did this buy one get one half off sale all the time. The way it works is you buy a more expensive pair and you get the cheaper of the two half off. Otherwise we'd lose money. So this woman comes in and buys 2 pair of kid shoes. Looks at the receipt and thinks that $50 is too much for her smaller child. So she returns them. She then proceeds to flip out because the difference for the other pair came out of the refund. I called the manager and he came up and she says he's a foster kid. He's not worth a $50 pair of shoes. Stop trying to rob me and give me my effing money. So manager refunded her the entire bill and took both pair of shoes and walked off. We all gave her the silent treatment until she left, angrily. I feel bad for both children and her husband who were just standing there quietly. This woman who used to come into the coffee shop I managed was the real world equivalent of Darla's Umbridge. She was smug, obnoxious and delighted in being a giant pain in the ass. She came in daily and had a ridiculously complicated drink order which she was unnecessarily nitpicky about. She came in one day when our grinder was having issues, which I warned her about. I happened to be on register and not on bar, and so my employee, who was my best employee at the time, made the drink. She took it and left. The next day she came in, and before she even hit the register she announced very rudely in my general direction, "You're making my drink, right?" I switched places with the person on bar in order to make it. As her drink was so wildly complicated, it took several minutes to make. throughout which I was told how terrible her drink had been yesterday, how it had ruined her day, how she'd lost faith in the company, etc. I apologized profusely and offered to calm her drink. That was not good enough. She told me she wanted the person who had made her drink before fired. I lost my temper. I more or less told her that I was sorry that her drink was not up to par the day before, but that I had apologized, offered a free beverage, and had actually warned her we were having an equipment issue the day before, which was the likely culprit, and not my employee. She told me I must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed, and I said no. Actually, you are a giant pain in the ass, your order is obnoxious, and we bend over backwards to accommodate you daily. She had a whole list of things aside from the crazy drink. It had to be served with a certain number of napkins. Her sleeve had to be facing a specific way, etc. And if that's how you feel, please take your business elsewhere. Coffee Umbridge tut-tutted her way out of my shop in a huff, and I didn't even care if I got in trouble for telling her off. I didn't. I feel so terrible for retail employees whose managers don't have their back and expect them to eat shit from every customer no matter what. I had an epically awesome manager at the local hamburger joint I worked for in college. I didn't have any personal altercations with customers, but I witnessed an amazing one with another employee. Let's call that other employee Chuck. A customer acts like a total dick before and after getting his order. Complains at the register after eating 3/4 of his hamburger, probably trying to scam a free meal. After some back and forth, the exchange went like this. "It's time for you to leave." "Excuse me?" I said, "Get the F out of here. I can't believe this. You can't talk to me like this. I demand to see your manager. You're getting fired for this." Manager comes over. "Hey Chuck, what's going on?" "I just told this a-hole to get the F out of here." Manager says to customer, without any hesitation, "Get the F out of here, a-hole." The look on the guy's face was absolutely priceless as he sheepishly took his food and left. I still smile thinking about it 20 years later. I work at Disney World. One time I had a particularly rude guest, and the end I told them to have a great day, not a magical day. I was a server years ago and this woman, usually a pretty nice lady, comes in and apparently we had messed up her salmon a few days prior, so the manager had given her a free meal card which is good for one single meal. Well, a few days later she comes in with at least 15 people about an hour before we closed, and they all order seafood and steak and wine and her whole party is awful to me and my friend who is another server. One guest even threw his plate on the ground, breaking it and throwing food all over because his steak was overcooked. After all of this, the other server went to take the woman her check, and it was a couple $100, and she whips out the free meal card. The server takes it to the register, comps one of the meals off, and comes back with a new total and the woman loses it. "I have a free meal card. This was one meal for all of us. It should be free." And the server just stiffens up and politely explains that that isn't how it works, and stresses that she had to have known that she couldn't have brought 15 people in here and expected free meals for everyone. The woman stands up and pours her red wine all over my friend, and my friend just goes "What the F" and runs to the back to get the manager. She kept her calm honestly, but the manager flipped and told her to get the hell out and never come back. That was a crazy night. Had a customer come in to do a return on a toilet seat, not to me, but the customer service person. She tells him store policy as we don't do returns on seats out of the plastic. He starts telling her he just took it out to check it and it's not the right shape. She repeats store policy and there's no manager here to override it. It's literally impossible for us to return it. He doesn't like this and starts raising his voice and trying to bully her. She's super shy and quiet, so she kinda just shut down. The other cashier says very loud, "It's dirty. He didn't just take it out. He's a liar." He became incredibly angry. I reached over and hit her light and said, "You're on break. Go upstairs." She protested, but I repeated and she left. He said, "What did that bee say?" I reply, "Don't worry about it. I'll handle it later. We aren't doing your return." He starts to protest again, but I cut him off. "I don't care. I don't care what you did or what you have to say. We aren't doing your return today. You've got two options. take your toilet seat home and come back tomorrow and talk to a manager, or take your seat and get out of here. Either way you're leaving here with that seat. He left. Managers became required to be there on weekends, and someone bought me some M&Ms. I had a guy come through my register once wanting to put some stuff on his store credit card. He didn't have the card or any ID, so I couldn't bring him through. Technically I could, but against SOP. He started screaming at me saying that everyone knew him there and that he was a regular. I was at my job for over a year and never saw that man once in my time working there before this incident. I told him no, I couldn't bring him through without the card or ID, but I could hold his stuff at register until he comes back. He proceeded to get more belligerent and in my face, so I told him in an assertive tone, you need to leave, you can't be yelling at staff. He leaves, then comes back an hour later to buy his stuff, but still no ID or card. I proceed to tell him I can't bring him in again, so he starts screaming bloody murder, wanting the RSM to come. Stupid ASM has no spine and tells me to ring the guy through, then goes back to the floor or wherever he was before. As soon as the ASM left, I told the customer to leave and that he wasn't welcome at the store anymore. Never saw him again after that. I was a fragrance vendor at a large chain department store. Think famous Christmas movies. The thing about fragrance vendors is we actually work for the fragrance company and not for the store, so I didn't report to anyone in that building or company I was working with. It was Christmas time, probably around the 23rd, when customers get desperate and crazy, and where employees have been shit on every day since Black Friday, so we just don't care at all anymore. I noticed a man waiting by the fragrance register, though there was no store employee. I asked if I could help him, and he said he had purchased a gift card at another register, but they hadn't given him an envelope to put it in. I said, no problem, let me check if we've got any here. Not technically my job, but I'm nice enough to do it. Lo and behold, we have 0 gift card envelopes. I'm very sorry sir, but it appears that we are out at this register. Other registers might have some. This is ridiculous. I buy a gift card, I should get a envelope to put it in. You people are the biggest idiots I've ever met. Sir, it's the 23rd of December. We are probably out of these envelopes everywhere. I don't even work for big department store chain, so I don't have to listen to you yell at me. I walked off, but I saw him deflate and shuffle off ashamed. If you enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing. r/ask Reddit. What did your whole neighbor do? We had a party for all the neighbors when we moved in. I like to barbecue, and my wife is vegetarian, so we have 2 barbecues. We invited everyone in the street. They declined because we are vegetarian. Not to worry, I said. So's my wife. We have 2 barbecues going. One for meat and one for vegas. I could see them trying to find another reason. They look at the invite. Oh, the 6th. We're out of town then. Sorry, that's cool. They don't want to come for whatever reason. They are not just going to say that. We are British. After all, the day of the party comes. Our garden is quite big, so everyone can fit in happily. We've got the barbecues going on the opposite side of the garden to the aforementioned neighbor's house. It's only about 4 hours into the party at around 5 PM that we notice the upstairs windows in their house are open. Weird. I thought they were out of town. As I'm looking at the windows with some of the other neighbors, we see the wife with a camera taking photos of us. We go round and ring the bell to explain this is the party they were invited to and they are still welcome to join. No answer. Curtains twitching upstairs. We go back to the party and just ignore them. Later into the evening, the parents and kids have gone home. Just a mix of older and younger neighbors left. And I'm now mixing cocktails at the outside bar. Honestly, this house was amazing. I have no idea how it was in our budget. But anyway, and then the police walking through the open back gate. Someone has lodged a complaint. It's only about 9 PM. Noise complaints in the UK are typically not followed up. until it goes past 11 PM. But not only are we having the biggest party known to man, but we are setting things on fire and forcing alcohol onto children. Of course the police can see we are having a fairly civilized adult get together and congratulate us on moving to the area and for getting to know our neighbors in such a friendly way. Monday, we are off to unpack. Knock on the door. The police now have photographs of the alleged forcing alcohol on a minor and setting fire to things. It's one of the neighborhood kids bringing two beers from the fridge to me and his dad at the barbecue. They are not even open. The setting fire to things? Yeah. Using a blowtorch to light my barbecue. Apparently that's endangering their property, which is a good 100 yards away from the contained fire within my oil drum barbecue. The police can see this is bullshit. They just need me to make a statement explaining. So I do. For the whole 2 years that we lived there, they avoided us. So weird. So unnecessary. I think your neighbors are the reason that place is so affordable. They're the definition of a negative adjacency. Picked a fight with our 70-year-old Indian neighbor. Like an actual physical fight. Duckstick is in his 30s. Indian neighbor has seen way too much bullshit in his life to tolerate anymore and hit him with a nectarine tree in a pot. Edit. Yes, the tree is okay. Hilariously. He actually gifted it to me last weekend after I helped him do a bunch of trellis work. We are both keen food gardeners. I haven't been able to look at it without cracking the duck up. If only more of life's problems could be solved by hitting someone with a nectarine tree in a pot. The stresses and strains and the sorrows and strife. The worries and woes and the worst of this life. The troubles you're getting. The struggles you've got. Are solved with a nectarine tree in a pot. When I was a teenager and lived with my parents, we had this one neighbor family that seemed sorta off. One day the father knocks on our door and tells my parents they haven't had power for a long time and begged to run an extension cord to one of our outside outlets for the day so his young kids could have cold milk with their cereal in the morning. My parents agreed to do this for one day. The neighbor kept up their part and disconnected the cable after that day. A week later they hook it back up again without us noticing. A month goes by and our electricity bill is basically double what it normally is. Parents head to the backyard and find the cable plugged in. Yank it out and confront the neighbor. At first the father doesn't show his whole body and cracks the door. But my stepdad gets him to open up the door after pointing out that he is concealing a gun. He didn't have to pull the gun out. Stepdad demands an explanation as to why the cable was run to our outlet, and the dude just sorta mumbles incoherently and shuts the door, locking it. Bad neighbor family was in a duplex and their neighbor, sharing the building, comes around and asks what's up. Parents explain the whole story and how the next step was calling the police. Good neighbor is a former police chief and is friends with the entire force. He offers to make the call. Several cop cars arrive. Bad neighbor father and mother are arrested. Turns out they were running a meth lab inside the house. The mother was a prostitute and the kids, a boy and girl between ages 7-10, were malnourished. The kids were put into foster care. No other bad neighbor has beat that high score yet. Holy hit. I wouldn't want to think of a bad neighbor that could beat that high score. Poor kids. I'm pretty sure the only way to beat that high score is if the parents were also diddling the kids. He used to stand on the footpath drunk every afternoon and yell to my husband about what a rich I was. Once my husband told him to go home and he shaped up to try and punch my husband, who was around 50 years younger than the neighbor. My infraction? He rang one day to be nosy check why my husband's car was home on a workday. I politely thanked him for his call and let him know my husband was sleeping and had a cold. Nothing to worry about. Apparently I was meant to praise him profusely for being such a caring neighbor, and my husband was meant to follow up with a call once he was awake and also lavish him with praise for caring. Because we didn't. We got to hear about it loudly every afternoon until we moved several months later. Feels like a r/ness guys. Edit. Word. r/ness a neighbor called the cops on our then 6 years old son because he was playing outdoors in public property. It wasn't a road or anything. There was no danger whatsoever. He wasn't screaming or anything. She just didn't like kids. She also told our 3-year-old daughter that she was ugly. I had a neighbor that told my sister she was beautiful and wanted to kidnap her and take her home, and then turned to me and explained how hideously ugly I was. Sister was 3. I was 7. I was more concerned about the kidnapping aspect. But I still remember the lady saying I was ugly over and over. So I guess it stuck with me. When the family moved out, we found out the brothers, her sons, had written all over the back of the closet doors in their shared room awful things about themselves. And a closer neighbor told us she used to see the mom up at all hours screaming at them. So that explained a lot. When I was 4, my mom took me with her to the mechanic. He said to her, "Your daughter is pretty," and I shyly smiled. "Pretty ugly." Bwahahahaha. Crushed. It's been over 3 decades. Man. Sometimes hit like that sticks with you. Late last year mine said he'll bash me because I got his driveway wet while I had a sprinkler going to water my yard. Not even joking, he flipped his head over his driveway getting water on it. He's a drug addict, so yeah. He must rage every time it rains. Old man yells at cloud. Yelled at me for entering a shared garage to get some of our stuff. He later claimed I was after his gun, which was stored in a gun locker with a lock that only he had a key for. He was in his 60s or 70s at the time. He died last year, though. Who TF keeps their weapons in shared spaces? Irresponsible gun owners. Jerry. When I moved in, he seemed eccentric, but harmless. Apparently my landlord had a conversation with him and told him to leave me alone. This upset Jerry greatly. He cornered me one day while I was unlocking my door and asked me to come sit with him in his apartment. I don't think the place had ever been cleaned, and he had hoarder mentalities. He drank a bottle of wine in about 30 minutes, commenting on all the sad things in his life. Luckily he passed out, so I could leave. A couple weeks later, he got into a 3 a.m. fight with his boyfriend, which resulted in his boyfriend trying to get into my apartment for safety and eventually breaking into an empty unit down the hall. Cops were called and Jerry was taken to jail. About a week after that, same boyfriend was over and a fight ensued. This time it ended in very loud X. Jerry would flush things you're not supposed to flush down the toilet and would back up sewage into mine and my neighbor's bathtubs and bathroom sinks. Eventually he clogged his toilet so badly that he just ripped it from the wall and left it there. The cops came twice to my door to ask if I had seen Jerry lately and asked to search my apartment to make sure I wasn't hiding him. One day while I was getting ready for work, he came into my apartment with another guy and tried to measure my walls for the renovation he was going to do to combine his and my apartments into one unit. But don't worry, I could just live with him when it was all finished. Eventually, Jerry got evicted, but would still convince people to let him into the building. For months his mugshot was pasted on all entrances saying to not let him in. LMAO at the renovation/annexation. Jerry, these are load-bearing walls. He had to access roads to his property. He didn't live there. He just had livestock there and insisted on using the one that cut through our property, despite the fact that it was the longer route and it was a literal unpaved road through the woods. He didn't have an easement or anything. Just assumed that since he had to drive through our property to get to that hitty lane road, he was allowed to do so. He was a total peen to us for no reason. Never said hi. Got upset if we were too close to his property despite the fact that he literally drove through our property every day. Revenge came when lightning struck a tree in the woods and it fell right across the access to the lane road on our property. He hired a service to chop the tree up and told them they could have the wood as part of the payment. It was nice walnut. My dad wasn't having any of that. He walked down there with a copy of the sale documents, pointed out the marker that clearly separated our land from our asshole neighbor's land, got the neighbor to admit that the tree in question was both from our land and currently laying on our land, not his. And then my dad sent the crew packing and told them if they took so much as a branch from that tree, it was theft and he, a lawyer, would see them in court for it. It's been over 15 years and that tree is still laying across the access to the lane road. He can still access his property via the other road. so he didn't have a leg to stand on to force an easement. Duck you, Jim. This is hilarious lol. Duck you, Jim. Duck you, Jim. Got his cop buddies to come put stickers on our cars claiming they were illegally parked, so we had to move them so he would have room for his guests to park. I bought a corner lot in a newer subdivision, so I have curb and sidewalk on two sides of my property. The side of my house has plenty of room for parking, which I sometimes use. My stepson uses, and sometimes the other neighbors I like use. New neighbor bought a house on the other side of the street from my side and doesn't have a lot of street parking for his lot. He claims that the parking on my side of the road is his because it is across the street from his house. When confronted about the fact that it is just parking and no way belongs to him, me or anybody, he told us he knows people in the police department that can take care of this. He also picked this time to scream pretty specific mean things about all his new neighbors and how each one was shitty, like he is watching us. A call to his superiors should help. Never saw the cop that put the stickers on our cars, and he didn't indicate a badge or unit number. I'm pretty sure he knew he shouldn't do it. I don't think the neighbor is a cop, just an asshole that has a friend. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together. Those who have worked at Disney World, what behind the scenes stories do you have that the public doesn't see? As a character, you are supposed to throw up in your mask if you are sick. Taking it off is not an option. You cover one eye with your hand and raise the other arm in the air to alert maintenance that you are not well. Also, if there is another character, same as you cannot, under any circumstances, be seen with them. You also must take a course to match signature style for autographs. Does it count if it's a different amusement park? The one I worked at has one of those sudden drop rides. A coworker found a single screw on the ground and they closed down the ride for days as they went over every inch of the ride. Turns out it was a screw that could have led to a seat opening and rider falling out if it hadn't been discovered. At Disney parks, all the screws on the rides have paint on them, and where they're attached is a seal, so they can see if the screw is loose or not. At least with that, they could tell if the screw belonged to the ride or not. If you hear an announcement over the park-wide sound system looking for a specific person, it is something very important. Announcements like that have a chain of approval before Disney will allow the magic illusion to be broken. But it's not always bad news, like informing families of a death. I've done several park announcements to find someone to inform them an organ donation was matched. A medical courier was on their way to Orlando and they needed to get to the hospital ASAP. I worked a cash register in Tomorrowland. A guy had a heart attack and died about 10 feet from me. I called it in as soon as I saw, but they already knew about it. I went on break shortly afterward and saw the family literally behind the scenes, crying their eyes out. That never happens. Guests are never allowed behind the scenes, except when somebody dies, I guess. Really kind of heartbreaking. On a positive note, they all got lifetime passes. I don't work there, but had a relevant experience. The stories about underground passageways and secret police are 100% true. Was in the Magic Kingdom for a band trip in high school, hanging out with a few friends. One guy, we'll call him Jack, decided it'd be a good idea to shoplift some keychains from one of the stores. This being Disney, there were probably 50 different security cameras that saw this. A few minutes later we are walking through a crowded area when someone gave me a flat tire and we stop. Two big guys are behind us and quietly tell Jack that he needs to go with them and tell the rest of us to let our band director know he needs to get in touch with security. They walk Jack over behind one of the stores where there's a cast members only door and disappear behind it. Later Jack told us they took him underground where he sat in a security room for the rest of the day where he was charged with shoplifting. They threw the book at him. They don't tolerate that shit at all. He got a huge fine and had to do community service in Florida. We lived in the Northeast. In retrospect, I have a huge amount of respect and a small amount of terror for how Disney handled the situation. They were incredibly subtle with the whole flat tire thing and how they quietly avoided making a scene. People walking past us had no idea what was going on. I know it sounds silly, but that experience alone probably helped me understand how terrifying and effective secret police in places like the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany were better than anything we ever learned in class. I have an autistic cousin, and while we were riding the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it broke down. My cousin flipped out, and Disney security literally appeared out of the walls. They took us into the back tunnels and into a freight elevator. Before we knew it, we're back outside. They were awesome in helping calm him as well. The Tinkerbell, that ziplines from the castle each night, is a nation dude. I worked at Club Disney for the brief time it was open. We had codes we used on the radio headsets that were coordinated with character names. For instance, code blue meant there was blood that needed to be cleaned up immediately. One day, I'm taking a stroll around the club to check on things when I spot a small boy about 2 years old taking a massive dump right in the middle of the play area. He sees me, starts to cry, and runs away with no clothing on the lower half of his body. I get on the radio and can't think of what to say, as we hadn't discussed a code for human faces in the play area and naked kid running around. So I just called, "I have a code poo situation in the play area and piglets on the loose." I used to be a cast member at the Disney store in my local mall. We were required to greet everyone within 10 seconds of them entering the store. There used to be a game online that kids would play about getting to the back of the store, grabbing a stuffed animal from the plush mountain, and get back up front before getting greeted. I saw this one teenager run across the store and dive headfirst in the mountain of stuffed animals, only to quickly find out that they were on risers. He was taken away on a stretcher, but ended up being fine. And yes, I greeted him while he was in midair, so he lost the game. Former WDW cast member. I swear most of my crazy stories come from working there. Things I've seen more than once: adult drop trouser and take a dump next to a line of people and walk off laughing. A mother climb a tree and swing down in the middle of another family's meet and greet with beast. She didn't want to wait in line. 3 people in wheelchairs in the same tree at another time. I have no idea. A man tried to swim in Cinderella's moat during fireworks. I was guarding the ropes. I tackled him. Snow White being thrown over the shoulder of a drunk man in Epcot in an attempt to carry her away. A Brazilian tour group beat the crap out of Donald Duck. Nights of Joy is hell on earth. The park is open to Christian youth groups and has Christian rock bands perform. During these nights, extra staff is put on and extra security because there is sex and drugs and theft happening around every corner. My managers were preparing us for it. They said if you see a bush rustle, kids are having sex behind it. The bathrooms have to be checked every 5 minutes, and any ride that goes dark for more than 3 seconds will have randy teenagers whipping their junk out. Those nights. Those terrifying nights. On our family trip to Disney World, I was leaning over a railing looking down into some water. A few unreachable feet below, I spot a tiny 5 feet to 2 feet alligator. Being from Africa and relatively unfazed with a slightly sharp swimming lizard, thought nothing of it. I called my mother over and said, "Look, an alligator. How cool." Sweet Jesus, was this a mistake? Not 2 seconds later, ears everywhere, man. A staff member was looking over the railing whispering on the radio. All hell broke loose in the most hushed professional way ever. We were escorted away on a golf cart and a huge section of the park was cordoned off. We were taken to a room where they were very apologetic for our negative experience and offered us a free day VIP, the works. So we said a big thank you and took what was offered. In future I will be smuggling other small harmless creatures in for free stuff. I also got stuck on the Big Thunder Mountain ride in Paris. That was handled in a much more French way. Jesus de soleil blows smoke in face. I'm a former Disney World Resort employee. I worked as a concierge at a deluxe resort, but sometimes had shifts at a value/moderate level resort. I came across a lot of famous and crazy people. Let me know if you have any questions. Government officials, including POTUS, normally stay at the Contemporary because it is the most secure resort. Celebrities want to stay in Cinderella's castle, but Disney has denied some of them based on how messy they have left hotel rooms before. Cast members see lots of famous people every day, all the time bragging about who you know to try to get free stuff from people. Getting paid minimum wage won't get you too far. On the flip side, Disney gives out a lot of money. If you complain enough to the right cast member at your resort, especially when staying at a deluxe resort, there is a good chance you will get money back. Disney has a huge budget for this. When the Polynesian was under major construction, just coming off this now, they give out a lot of money to angry guests who didn't do research ahead of time. If you are mean to cast members, you better believe we are putting notes on your reservation. Disney has a lot of computer systems, and they track crazy guests' behavior. When you come up to the desk and scan your magic band, I will be warned if you have yelled or been out of line to another cast member. And that is across the board. All the Disney resorts use the same system. As for craziest stories, I have been asked where to get drugs, where to go to get prostitutes, and I also had a guest that ended up being a con woman. I have also had guests pass me their phone number. I can only imagine how bad it is for the princesses. You definitely learn a lot about people and grow thick skin working for Disney. I think that experience helped me get my current job, but also allowed me to have newfound respect in what may be the most difficult customer service industry around. A friend of mine told me that the rules for workers at the European Disneyland were so strict that they took to calling it Maus Auschwitz. When management got wind of this, they were told that anyone found using that name again would be fired. Apparently it was only a couple of hours before they were calling it Dakar. Everyone in the call centers is given a stage name, so no two agents have the same name to the guests. Most unique stage names I can remember: Cotton, Casper, Arizona, Lucinda. When you're in training, they give you a selection of like 20 names to choose from, so you better hope you're one of the first ones to pick, so you can get a normal name and not get stuck with Cotton FFS. I worked on the Great Movie Ride in Hollywood Studios for a while, and I can tell you all 22 minutes of your friendly tour guide speech is scripted to the very last letter. You get 3 days to learn your whole monologue and all of the speed / control / stops / goes of the actual ride before going live as a tour guide. Most of those 3 days is spent in a room with your trainer reciting your script until you get every word right. If you accidentally say the word okay instead of alright, you start over from the beginning. Most tedious 3 days of my life. There's also one button on every car that, despite being really close to buttons, you have to touch all the time. If pushed, gets you fired immediately. Compulsory. I never worked for Disney, but a friend did. Disney security listens to all Disney radio channels at all times for any distress call or other issue that is relevant to security. My friend, we'll call him Daniel because that's his name, worked for Disney World in Florida once. He worked in one of the resorts. I'm not quite sure what his job actually was, but his radio call sign was Movie Runner. He was walking between resorts one night, and near a pool he was cornered by a mama bobcat. Usually not a huge deal, because the bobcat will eventually realize the person is not a threat, but he radioed the resort to let them know that he was being cornered by a bobcat. Next radio transmission. Without missing a beat: Movie Runner, this is Disney Security Base. We understand you are being cornered by a bobcat. Please remain calm. We have 2 units approaching your location. Each 2 minutes. Please acknowledge. Over. Most likely get buried at this point, but I remember once I was leaving the park. You know how it gets ridiculously crowded at the exits when the park is shutting down. I got elbowed in nose, got a bloody nose. All of a sudden the staff swooped in and took me to the underground tunnels, then to a golf cart that brought us to our car. Definitely a quick exit. My first day as a CP, college program intern, working at the Magic Kingdom in January 2005. After all the tours and fun stuff and exploring the tunnels, I had a meal at the Mousquetaria cafeteria and had my eye on Cinderella and some other princess, maybe Snow White, while I ate. They were mad. After the meal, I went out to wait for the bus back to the parking lot around the same time they left. Now keep in mind, characters aren't allowed to keep their costumes on as soon as they're off stage, so the princesses typically walked around in tank tops and short pajama shorts, but the with wig and full makeup. So I'm waiting for the bus, and Cinderella and Snow White are full on shit talking some slut who slept with one of their boyfriends while chain smoking. Turns out, they were talking about a girl who played Ariel. Seriously? 21-year-old me was in total shock, because it was my first day and knew it could only get better from there, and it did. Like the time Aladdin and Peter Pan were making out on one of the tables in the same mouse cafeteria. Or the time I saw Mickey Mouse give someone the finger underground directly after a parade. It's hot in those costumes. She was probably justified. Or the time a different Cinderella got really pissed because Paris Hilton was visiting the park that day and didn't go to see her. On the bus back to the lodge she was like, I'm fucking Cinderella. Why wouldn't she come find me? Oh man. Good times. Good times. Not an employee, but I have an interesting story about Disney. When I was 7, I went to Disney World. The third night we were there, I rolled out of my bed and cut my forehead on the nightstand. My mom came over to comfort me, not knowing I was bleeding quite profusely. She turned the light on when I wouldn't stop crying. She said it looked like a murder had taken place. Paramedics were called, and the room was swarming with what I can only assume were Disney employees. After I was evaluated and patched up, I was taken to the gift shop around 2 AM with my mom and an employee. I got to choose 3 toys at no cost to my family. It was pretty incredible to be in the completely abandoned gift shop and being told I could have anything. When we returned back to the room 25 minutes later, all the blood was cleaned up, guardrails were put on my bed, and a large basket of candy and other sweets were left on a table. Disney doesn't play around with customer service. NSFW, what is the most messed up thing someone admitted to you while drunk? That he, my best friend, regularly slept with my girlfriend, his stepsister, from the time they were teenagers, for several years, and it didn't stop, even after she and I got together. Good friend looked me right in the eyes and said, no one in my family actually likes me. I never knew what it was like to be cared about before I met you guys. Not that crazy or anything, but has always stuck with me, made me appreciate what I have. So I have a friend who, whenever he gets drunk, tells a story that he swears he has never told anyone else. Apparently, when he was 19, he was dating this girl, and he stayed over her place, but due to her dad's rules, he was not allowed to sleep in her bed, but instead had to sleep on a mattress on the floor. In the middle of the night, he awoke to someone giving him a blowjob. He just let it continue. When he was done, the giver came up to reveal it was his girlfriend's 16-year-old brother. Now, as I mentioned, he says he has never told anybody this, but mutual friends tend to talk, and without giving the whole story away, we have discovered he has told about 20 people about this, but forgets who he has told. I had an ex-girlfriend, 8 years ago in college, tell me she and her brother used to play a game when they were 5 and 6 meters. They would sneak downstairs before their parents got up to have the prince, his penis, and the princess, her vagina, kiss. Yes, it is what you think it is. She went on to tell me, when they heard their parents get up they rushed to put their clothes on. I didn't know what to say other than, yay. So don't tell other people that story. Not really fucked up what he told, but more the way he told. A close friend was with me, and a female friend at a bar that was on a street known for prostitution. There were many sex workers standing all along the street. Across the street, where the bar is, was a trans woman with a bulge on her panties. She was wearing a bikini. This friend kept making jokes about shemales and offensive comments all the time. At first we laughed a bit, but it got annoying after the first 15 minutes. After 2 hours of drinking and random comments about shemales, I had it and said, okay dude, we get it. You don't like shemales. This is getting really annoying now. The girl with us completed the comment. It's like you're overcompensating because you are actually into them. He was torn with that and started crying and telling us that he was getting crazy because he was so into it and he felt it was wrong, how disgusting it was, and he couldn't live with himself. He was miserable. It wasn't a shock that my friend, who was the biggest womanizer I know, was into women with penises. But the way he completely unreeled years of repressed feelings in a bar. We tried supporting him and telling him it's perfectly okay. Nothing wrong with that. But he had a really loud voice. Imagine him drunk. The whole bar was quiet listening to him. And that's when it got worse. He started detailing how he found out and how he wasn't even able to get an erection with a woman anymore without thinking about shemale porn. He really went into details while we just tried to make him shut up and stop crying in the middle of the bar. TL. Dr. Friend told everyone in a radius of 100 yards that he couldn't get aroused except with shemale porn. The band I played in was trying out a new singer. One day we went over to his place to hang out. Early afternoon. Dude was already drunk and a little incoherent. Starts ranting about something and ends with, "It wouldn't have happened if the right people had won World War II. And, just to set the tone, this 32-year-old man's house was filled with stuffed penguins. Everywhere you looked, a fucking stuffed penguin. On the shelves, on the couch, the tables, everywhere. Nazi penguins." We were playing Never Have I Ever, and this one drunk girl said, "Never have I ever caught my boyfriend looking on Craigslist for other men to have sex with, then put her own finger down." We all just sort of quietly looked around. One of my oldest friends got completely trashed at my place and admitted he liked wearing women's clothing and asked if he could try on a few of my dresses. I obliged and we had a lot of fun, but the next morning, when he woke up in a lacy purple dress and couldn't find the clothes he had worn to my place, he was pretty embarrassed. He now does drag shows sometimes in another state, and I've heard they're really good. Not drunk, but when I got really high this one time, I put my head on my cousin's lap and told her she was a beautiful being with really soft thighs. Nurse I boned told me how the favorite part of her job was letting people die. She went on about how she's an IQ nurse and just, I don't know, lets people die. Sounded more sinister when she was bragging about it. Hey man, you know when sometimes you're in the shower and you have to take a shit, so you just squat down, take a dump, and then push it through the drain cover with your toes? No? Oh. Well, okay then, never mind. While I was at a birthday party for one of my best friends, his best friend and girlfriend both drunkenly admitted to me, separately, that they were sleeping together and felt horribly guilty about it. If it was one of them, I'm not sure what I would have done. Since it was both of them, I took the hard route and told him about it. It was either true or a total prank. It was awful, but it was the right choice. It was true. The one that took me off guard the most was this girl I sat talking to for a couple hours. Then suddenly she says she's been stressing so much lately that she lost all her hair. She then went on to pull off her wig, displaying a completely bald head. This girl was 18. How the hell can you be so stressed by 18 that you lose all your hair? Last year, my friend's 21st birthday coincided with Pride, so she wanted to get drunk and go watch the parade. We bought a bottle of Malibu each. It was her favorite, and attempted to each drink the whole thing. 3 hours and an ungodly amount of Malibu later, we clearly can't finish a whole bottle each despite our best efforts, so we offer some to the two guys sitting next to us. We each start talking to one of them, and my friend and #1 clearly start hitting it off. Guy #2 and I start making small talk. Where you from? Arizona. Did you come just for the parade? And from here he immediately launches into the saga of how he cut off his left testicle with a razor blade. No anesthesia, no preparations, just decided to go for it in the bathroom. And this was the third thing he ever said to me in his life. I'm a girl, but goddamn that sounds painful. Was drinking with one of my female roommates at the time, and she told me that her grandmother had grabbed a hold of her, looked her in the eye, and said that she wanted to die and that she, her granddaughter, should kill her. My uncle will get drunk and ramble about how when my grandma dies, he's gonna be set for life and won't have to work again. That he's going to kick me and my mom, primary caretakers for my GMA, out of her house. It's only a matter of time before I catch your aunt on camera. My mother once told me, you know, you're going to be great when you get older. Your sister used to be the best daughter in the world, and as she got older she became the opposite. So you're going to be a great son. It's a close one. I had a friend get drunk and start crying. He told me he had gotten his ex pregnant, and she insisted on an abortion. He couldn't stay with her after that, and he hated himself for everything that happened in that relationship. Super, he's one of my happiest friends. One of my other friends got drunk and high soon after I told him I was engaged. He started crying and told me he had a crush on me and was in love with my fiance. Then he tried to fight me because of it. I once drunkenly admitted to hooking up with an individual named Stevie. I'm a heterosexual male. Stevie is actually a girl, but I forgot to explain that bit. They made fun of me for a long time for that one. More on point, my ex-girlfriend once drunkenly explained to me how she and my other ex-girlfriend had more sex with each other than either did with me. That was an emotional roller coaster. A friend of mine admitted that he regularly smells his sister's used bras and knickers before she washes them. To be fair, she is fucking cracking looking. Definitely a 10. My brother's wife admitted she had cheated on my brother. She also said he had cheated on her. A few months later, they were divorced. A guy who had always been really pretentious and stuck up admitted that he acts like a dick because he's so afraid of people disliking him. He tries to at least make them dislike him on his terms. Admitted his logic was if he acts like a dick intentionally, then stops being dickish, people would think he'd suddenly become a great guy. Sad part was when he broke down sobbing and said he'd forgotten how to act normal anymore. Being a prick was just a knee-jerk reaction at this point. He felt like a good guy trapped in a douche cake's body. Next day he was back to normal, no memory of the night before, walking around correcting people and humble bragging that he can't get hard anymore. He said it in the middle of a car ride home from a party in the middle of a completely off-topic conversation. We all looked at him in silence. After he said it, he's 20 years old. I'm a man. I was raped by a gay coworker. I woke up periodically throughout the process, but I was too black to do anything. I vaguely remember his dick in my mouth. I eventually woke up while he was butt fucking me, and I shoved him off of me and ran away. My asshole bled for days. It was pretty fucking horrible. Suicidal thoughts. Which is interestingly probably the most fucked up thing I've admitted to anyone else while drunk too. When we were high, my friend told me that her cousin, who I knew, had a secret half-brother who she and her siblings didn't know about. It was a whole thing where for a while their father had a secret second family. Everyone in my friend's family knew, but the three cousins had no idea. A couple years later my friend had a destination wedding and me and her cousin were bridesmaids. We were all trashed in a pool and the cousin ended up telling me that she had recently found out she had a half sibling, and since I was about 7 rum and cokes and I simply responded, oh man, I knew that years ago. Not fucked up but fucking hilarious. This happened the first week of vet school. I walked outside with a new classmate and I said it smelled like anal sacs. These are scent glands that dogs have near their anuses and produce a distinctive smelling fluid. Her jaw dropped and she sadly said, I don't know what that smells like. I always wanted to try it, but my boyfriend won't. Yeah, she thought I said anal sex. I was so the driver. She and I never spoke about it again. I wonder if she ever found out what that smelled like. My best friend came over to my house to celebrate his birthday and we were drinking a lot, and I noticed him getting more and more down. I thought it was weird because we were smoking blunts and doing goofy freestyling to random beats on YouTube, so I thought it was a good time. After a couple more beers he broke down, starting tearing up, and told me about how his mom left his family when he was a kid. Apparently she left to go shopping or something and just never came home, and he hadn't heard from her since. I'd never met his mom and he'd never mentioned her to me ever, and I'm not the type of person to be like, hey, where's your mom? So that part didn't come as much of a surprise. The worst part was how he then went on to tell me how he resents his birthday because even if his mom doesn't give a shit about him, he still wonders if she ever thinks about him, and even if she doesn't think about him often, she'd definitely be thinking of him on his birthday at the very least. He spiraled down pretty quickly and said something along the lines of, I know she has to be thinking of me today. Why doesn't she try to contact me? What did I do that was so wrong that she wouldn't want me anymore? From then on, I made him know that he is wanted, and he's accompanied me on Mother's Day brunches with my family as well as Thanksgiving and Christmas. He's like a brother to me, and knowing that he thinks like that is heartbreaking as fuck, especially since he's such a good-hearted dude. I once got drunk with a coworker and he showed me his 50 pistol. He told me he was in some big debt with some dealers. Then he broke down in tears and told me about the time he was spiking heroin and overdosed his best friend and killed him. He passed out, and I ate some Bajal bites he had in his freezer. sitting around bullshitting with neighbor, and he tells me that 15 years prior, he and a buddy beat and robbed this man they saw walking down the street, and without meaning to, they killed him. They tossed him in their car and drove down some country roads and found a spot to throw him out. Woke up the next day to a backseat full of blood and had a vague memory of the whole thing, but couldn't remember where they dumped him. He said they lived in fear every day of getting caught, and after about a year his buddy left town never to be heard from again. He said he himself married, had kids, and lived his life, that every year that passed, he felt safer and more certain they'd gotten away with it. I wasn't sure either to believe him or not, but a couple of days later, in a rarely sober moment, he asked if I'd said anything about his story to anyone. I told him no. He very calmly told me that 3 people knew: himself, the buddy who vanished over a decade ago, and me, so if anything came of it, he'd know where it came from. Luckily he went to jail for a DUI, and I moved away. What is the most disturbing thing you've witnessed during school/on school grounds? We had a student who just came in from Nigeria. One day some kid pulled the fire alarm for kicks, and after the count we noticed the Nigerian kid wasn't outside. So we started looking all over the school. The police were called and hours passed, still no luck. Towards the end of the day someone heard whimpering out of a very small space behind the Coke machine. We took a look and there he was curled up with tears rolling down his face, shaking uncontrollably. A teacher reached out, but he would push further back. Finally he was coached out and taken to the principal's office. As it turns out the fire alarm was the same as the one used to alert his community of an incoming gang attack, which often meant ethnic cleansing. The boy was a refugee and had not parents. I can only imagine the horrors that child has seen to react that way to an alarm. That experience has stuck with me my whole life and serves as a reminder of just how good we have it in Canada. Massive fight in front of school. Kid gets hatchet axe out of car and lifts it above his head to hit the other kid on the ground and probably kill him. Principal takes axe out of kid's hand and knocks him with the butt end of the axe, basically saving the other kid's life. This happened in 1988 and that guy is still principal. He was in his early 30s back then. 2 girls get into a fight in the cafeteria. Shit goes down. Hair pulling, kicking, slapping. All of a sudden someone yells for an ambulance. Turns out during the fight one of the girls went into labor. I was suspended because a teacher thought my camera was a bomb. Even after I proved to the principal and the police that it was just a camera, I was still suspended. Their reasoning is that they wanted to be perceived as being hard on bomb threats, which I'm all for except for the part where everyone knew it was not a bomb. Our PTA lady died in front of the entire school when I was in 3rd grade. We had an assembly and she was speaking and had a history of fainting. This time instead of fainting her heart stopped and she just fell over. It was incredibly sad. She was a really nice lady. Her son was in the audience too. Edit. I believe she was the principal's secretary or assistant, but she also the head of the Parent Teachers Association, so we just referred to her as the PTA lady. I went to high school in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. The seniors were allowed to drive to school and would get there early and hang out in the parking lot before homeroom. Well, one day a huge buck comes strutting into the parking lot. A couple of the redneck kids decide that they are going to kill it. So they get this deer cornered against the school, and I swear on all things holy this fucking deer jumps through a window and into a classroom. They don't let anyone in the school and call the cops and game wardens to get this thing out of there. Meanwhile it's bleeding everywhere because of the glass. So after about 45 minutes they finally get a hold of it and take it outside where it runs as fast as it can towards the woods. However, there's the main road through town before you get to the woods. As it's crossing the street it gets hit by car. It was a bad day to be a deer. Young girl who was always in trouble took her duckling to school one day, just walked around with it in her pocket. At some point she decided to take her shoes off and was running around in and out of the classroom during class in just her socks. Sure enough, she slipped and fell. It practically exploded in her pocket. I can still remember her face and the screaming when she pulled a handful of minced duckling out of her pocket. It was as if the duckling's head had been degloved. Not really disturbing, but I watched a kid get tased my 7th grade year. He was a very obnoxious 8th grade kid. Stood on top of a table in the cafeteria one morning and started doing pelvic thrusts. One of the teachers who happened to be around walked over and told him to stop. He hit her and she proceeded to chase that bastard around until he dove under the table and got away from her. He ran straight into the school resource officer. He then proceeded to punch the SRO in the gut pretty hard and bolted for the cafeteria door. SRO followed in hot pursuit. I went out to the hall to see what happened, and when I turned the corner there the little fucker was on his ass after being tased 10/10 would witness again. It's a long story, but I'll try to make it quick. A guy followed my friends and me from middle school and I told when we stopped walking, we had to split up. Seems weird, but not too weird. We chat for a while. The guy never leaves the car. I realize that the windows, even the driver's side one, is tinted, which is illegal in my state. We talk for 15 plus minutes. He doesn't move. I pull out my cell phone to tell my mom I'm going to be late. The guy peels away and that's when we noticed he had no plates. To make it worse, my best friend was going to walk 4 blocks to her empty house because her dad didn't come home till 5 and she barely weighs 110 lbs. I have no doubt she would have been abducted if I hadn't taken out my phone. A girl at my school was giving a dude a blowjob in one of the bathrooms at my school. She started having a seizure and the guy wasn't sure what to do so he just went back to class and left her there. Someone eventually found her and they called security. Not sure what ended up happening to the girl. Not disturbing, but in 3rd or 2nd grade, my friend brought stink bombs to school, the ones that inflate with pressure, and gave one to me and kept one for himself. Before school started we were playing on the playground and just as I'm about to go in oop I check my backpack and mine was inflated. I quickly throw that shit as far away as I could. Some native kids ran over there and started stomping on it thinking it was funny. Before mine went off, I kicked my friend's backpack. Asshole move I know. His started inflating as well. He threw his as far out as well. Some more kids went over to stomp on his. Both blew up and about 10 to 15 kids had to go home because they stunk so bad. My buddy and I got ice for a month. When I was in 10th grade I was friends with an 11th grader we'll call Doug. Doug was a seriously damaged dude. Lots of family issues. He was currently in foster care, etc. We had basically become friends through a mutual friend, but got on really well. He was this tall kid with a mohawk and piercings and people were sort of intimidated by him. I was top of my class, captain of the debate team, on the academic squad etc. It was a weird friendship. Anyway, Doug had a best friend, another girl who was equally fucked up and damaged. And they loved each other, not romantically, but the way that people who truly have no one else who gets it love each other. So we are sitting in biology one morning, the only class we had together, when there is an announcement. Doug's best friend killed herself the night before. The class goes totally silent, and you can feel the air shift as everyone turns to look at him. There was this pause, like when something is teetering on an edge and you are waiting to see if it falls. It fell. He went completely nuts, flinging desks over, hurling beakers and shit. The teacher hustles everyone out into the hallway. He's pulling me out the door as I'm begging him to let me go back and try to talk to Doug. I slipped back in as he was turning to call the office. I just sort of stood there while Doug continued rampaging. He sort of got near me and I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. By the time the school resource officer and everyone else got there I had him in the corner of a couple lab tables laying my lap just sobbing. Fortunately, our SRO was actually a really kind lady and, rather than bustin' all, he's a danger blast.